We all feel like a fraud at some point. Let's get rid of your imposter syndrome.
Hello, all you edgy entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us for episode 18 in this second season of The Edgy Entrepreneur, where this season's all about relationships. And we believe that if you really want to be influential in your community, your household, or in your place of business, you really need to master the art of cultivating healthy relationships, right? Thanks again for joining us. My name is Daniel Tribby. I am a healthcare entrepreneur and a consultant for private healthcare practices.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Coach Oriana Guevara. I'm a life and personal performance coach and a certified relationship coach.
Today's topic is, I know it's something that a lot of people deal with. I'm sure you've dealt with it before. I've dealt with it before. In fact, there is research out there that says that 70% of the people on the planet deal with this at least once in their lifetime, right? And that problem is imposter syndrome. Okay, so imposter syndrome loosely is defined as believing that you are not going to be good enough, or that you're a fraud, or you lack the expertise to show up powerfully. And so you tell yourself this internal story about why you can't be successful. Coach, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Comes from a place of deep self-doubt and doubting your abilities, maybe even despite having done things well in the past, right? So I want to make it clear that like your relative level of success that you've accomplished in life doesn't make you immune to the experience of imposter syndrome, right? Like you could be very successful and still experience imposter syndrome, which is probably like why it's so frustrating to get there. But a lot of times a person gets stuck in imposter syndrome and they don't realize that that's what it is, right? But they are feeling the self-doubt and they're feeling that they're not qualified to do what they want to do next, right? They're not making the connections between how they got to where they are, like what brought you here, and connecting what they want to do next.
And there's also a comparison issue, right? You know, well, why are people going to pay attention to me? Or why would people buy my service or my product when I've only just started doing this, a few months ago? So there's all these questions, and that self-doubt leads you ultimately into inaction.
Who am I to do this? Who am I to be listened to by others, or called an expert in this field?
Right. Or what are my peers going to think? What will my family say? Oh, I'm going to go start this business. Oh, you sure you can do that? Like why, what makes you think you could do that? Or, if you've been in a field for 15, 16 years and finally you decide you want to go out on your own and do something different, you're going to have potentially some people who are questioning why, or questioning your ability, which internally makes you do the same thing to yourself, right?
If you're in that place of self-doubt, and when you show up to other people to tell them about the thing you want to do next, they're just going to mirror back your own self-doubt, right? And so, or it might even feel that way, even though their intentions are pure, right? So somebody might ask, well, why do you want to do that next? Or what's taking you in that direction? And totally innocent question, like a curious question.
Right.
And your interpretation is, oh, they doubt that I can do it.
Right. It's offensive, right? And so I'm defensive in response.
Yeah. And really, it's like you doubt that you can do it. And that's why you're interpreting somebody's curious question as doubting you.
Because if you didn't have that doubt, you would respond much differently. Probably in a way that was like, oh, thanks for asking. Well, I'm actually feeling, and then you go on into your explanation.
You'd see it as an opportunity to really step into the role, right? Just by answering the question.
If you didn't know, there are actually 5 different types of this. And so we're going to break each one of these down. So maybe you can identify with which 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of them you struggle with, and then give you some kind of coping mechanisms that you can do that'll help you get past that, or help you control those thoughts a little bit better. So, and while it's called a syndrome, it's not a diagnosable thing, okay? It's not at all. There's no test you can take. There's no psychologist you can go see that's going to say, yep, you check all the boxes, right? And you get diagnosed with this. But it does have roots in perfectionism.
Right.
Right. So, and if perfectionism is something you struggle with, we're going to touch briefly on it today, but you can definitely check out episode 13 in this season that deals all with perfectionism and how living the quote unquote perfect life is quite the fantastic lie you tell yourself. So definitely check that one out if this episode sparks something in you of your perfectionistic traits.
So let's talk about some of the typical characteristics of imposter syndrome, but also I want to mention maybe at some points in time that people commonly experience imposter syndrome. And I can think of two. You can probably think of some more.
Sure.
But one is when you're transitioning from like doing a career or business transition, right? Like everybody knows me within this context of this career that I built over here, doing this thing, known as an expert for this. But I'm transitioning now into this, right? And so I might be an expert here, over here, might be an evolution of the thing I've been doing, but I'm going to feel like a novice, right? And so going into that place of like, I'm not as much of an expert, or I know some things in this camp, but not everything. I'm going to have to learn and grow through a learning curve, right? That place or that experience can trigger imposter syndrome, and that could be business related, but that could also be relational, right?
Yep,
like
absolutely
becoming, brand new into a relationship, brand new getting married, brand new becoming a parent, or some other phase of relationship status.
Moving to new areas. Sometimes, like if you have become the high achiever, right, and you now are, let's say you're used to living a certain way, and you've had the success, and now you come into the revenue or into the fortune, right, and then so now you move to a different area. Maybe you go live in a golf and country club, and now you're surrounded by people who are also high achievers, and you start to think, do I really belong here? Like, these people, this guy has a attorney practice with 17 locations. Like, am I really this good? And so you start to get into that social anxiety portion as well, right?
A lot of these are associated with life transitions, right? Career transitions, relationship transitions. Tribby's talking about really a transition in your socioeconomic status in the world, right? Another one that I can think of is when you are really transitioning in your mindset, right? You might still be more or less doing the same things, but you might have had like an incredible personal expansion and personal growth where you're now seeing the world in a different way, right? Like your perception of everything around you is different. And so you're starting to kind of question, like, do I still fit in these spaces and in these places? Like, what am I doing here? Who am I really here? Right? Like you start to perceive yourself in those spaces in a different way.
There's definitely a root to this, and it usually comes from parenting styles, right? So we all, as adults, carry some trauma, some way, shape, form, or fashion into, that's from our childhood. We carry this from that point into adulthood, and it usually is a story we tell ourselves. And even though we may have done the work to deal with it, cope with it, and move beyond it, when you're in the middle of it, that trauma can sometimes just pop up and rear its ugly head, right? So if you had, parents that were overly controlling, right, this can be predisposing to this imposter syndrome. You could also have overprotective parents. If you have parents who have done something really well, they're very successful, then you might feel the need or desire to do the same thing, right? So that you can follow along with the family dynamic. And so you put this pressure on yourself to succeed, all the while you're comparing yourself to what your parents did, right? Which can lead you again to think, oh, maybe I'm not as good as them. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe all these questions that come up in your mind. So this is a typical thing that starts in childhood.
Let's really get into how it shows up in your life and like the specifically 5 types of imposter syndrome, because this was actually new to me when I started to learn more about imposter syndrome. I first didn't resonate with the experience at all when I would hear people talk about it when I was in my career. And then once I learned a little bit more, then I was like, oh yeah, I have felt that in different points in time. I definitely felt that when I was transitioning out of my experience of being in my career path for 15 years, right, and being an expert in X and out of that into starting my own business, right? And those, in hindsight, like a lot of that self-doubt is what created mental and emotional barriers to me really taking the leap to leave my career and start my own business and go all in on coaching, right? But a lot of what I think that we can look at is times in the past where we've experienced imposter syndrome. Once you understand what the different 5 types of imposter syndrome are, then you can do that a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, you might be sitting here going like, oh, no, I don't have that. I've never experienced that like I used to, right?
Let's kick these off. So the first one is the perfectionist, right? So this is, like I told you earlier in this episode, imposter syndrome has its roots in perfectionism. And so what happens is you feel like if you can't do something absolutely perfect, then you're not going to do it. Or if you did it, but it could have been better.
Yeah,
right?
By your own judgments.
Right, by your own judgments, right? It makes you believe that you're not as good as others might think you are. So listen to that. It makes you think that you're not as good as others might think you are.
Even when you accomplish the goal.
Exactly.
Right? So like I ran the race, I crossed the finish line, but the perfectionist is going to say, yeah, but you didn't do it fast enough.
Right. You could have done it 10 seconds quicker.
Yeah, but you slowed down on that hill. Yeah, but your ankle was hurting part of the time, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's the perfectionist, like totally disregards the fact that you crossed the finish line, right? Like you reached the
berate
goal.
yourself, in other words, right?
Yeah.
You accomplish it, but then you follow that up with berating. Right.
Yeah.
And so you're like, I achieved it, but I could have.
And this makes it really hard to receive like recognition or appreciation from other people for your accomplishment, although it might have been an accomplishment that helped and supported them to be more successful, right? Because you're inside of yourself, you're kind of, whipping yourself about not doing it perfect. They're just glad that you did it. They're just happy for you for doing it, right? And for setting an example and being a model, and you're just like, oh yeah, no, it's just a thing I did,
Yeah, and it shows up in everywhere. Think about like if you have children and you threw a birthday party for your child and you wanted everything to be perfect, right? But the company brought the wrong bouncy castle to the kid's birthday party. All the kids are having a blast. All the parents are enjoying being there also, but you're sitting in the back thinking to yourself, it's not perfect, but everybody else is having a great time. Yeah. This is something you do to yourself. It happens in all these different circumstances, right? Yeah. From how we are as parents to how we are as business people to even how we are in our personal relationships, right?
The fact that when you're in this perfectionist mindset, it causes you to really show up very micromanaging and controlling. So what's the next type?
The next one is the expert, right? The expert. So the expert imposter syndrome. So this person feels like they're an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a certain topic, business, or what have you, okay? So, and they will not move until they feel like they know all of the things about the business or the task or the job, whatever it might be, right? I have to know it all. I can't move. I don't know enough yet. I got to read 17 more books and take another course, and it's another excuse for me not to get off my ass and take action.
This is a conversation I have a lot in my coaching practice because people usually recognize they have a dream that they want to bring to life, and then starts all of this disqualifying reasons why now is not the right time. And one of them is the expert, right? I don't know enough. I don't know what I don't know. I need or I should get another degree or certificate because that would make my business or me more successful once I launch my business, right?
And people will respect me more if I have more credentials.
Right.
Stop it.
Right. And, talking as a person who has credentials and has worked in places with people who have very high credentials, I can tell you that in a lot of ways, it does not make any difference whatsoever.
It absolutely doesn't. I think, too, I'm going to pose this little situation for you. If I had a problem with the, say, with the plumbing in my house, okay, and I call the plumber, the local expert, right? And, we can come out there in 3 days to fix your problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's uber frustrating. And so maybe I'm complaining to my neighbor, and my neighbor says, hey, I've got some experience doing some home renovations and stuff. Let me take a look. And they fix it within an hour. Who's the expert in that situation?
Yeah.
It's not the guy that owns the plumbing business who couldn't come see you for 3 days. It's the dude that got the effing job done, right? That's the expert. He doesn't have credentials. He might have some experience. The characteristic is you have an inability to adequately assess your abilities.
Yeah, this is such a big one. And it's funny because this is such a big one with people that have a lot of experience and actually do have like the degrees and the credentials and all the stuff. And they're still like, yeah, I should go back to school. Like, no, you are not going back to school right now. That is the last thing you need to do right now. What you need to do is take action on building your business.
Third one, this is the natural genius, okay? This is the person who believes, and I'm laughing at this because it seems so counterintuitive to me, but I know a lot of you suffer with it, so forgive me for my chuckle, but you feel like a fraud simply because you don't think you're intelligent enough to do it. And I want to tell all of you that intelligence is not something that you're just magically born with. Are there people who are born with a higher level of genius? Sure, there are. But if you have the belief that you can't improve your intelligence, holy shit, go read a book.
That's a very fixed mindset.
Right.
It's wrapped up in like a deep, deep fear of failure. Maybe also some fear of success, right? Because there's the lack of understanding there that in order to reach success, you have to usually fail several times, or you have to, in the very least, you're going to have to make several attempts, right? And so if each one of those attempts, it could be very honest, decent attempts where performance was, increasingly better and better and better each time. But if your perception is that every single one of those attempts that didn't quite hit the target was a failure, such a heavy word, right?
Right.
Then this is where you're at. And it's part of imposter syndrome, and it's going to hold you back from continuing, because if every time you make an attempt, you feel like a failure, right? And you're not doing anything to discharge that feeling inside or to change that story or that belief system. You're just hanging on to that. At some point in time, you're going to go say, I don't think attempting is worth it anymore.
Some people have the expectation that if they can't do something perfectly right the first time, then they're not going to do it, right? Because it takes more work on their part, right? I don't want to have to put the work in, right? So this is part of your natural genius, right? If you've had success doing things right the first time, and then you come across something where you can't do it perfectly right the first time, there's your perfectionist setting in, right? So you feel like, I'm not a natural genius here. Therefore, I'm not going to step into that role and figure out more about it and learn more about it. I'm just going to move on to something else that's more in my comfort zone that I've accomplished before, that was easy, right?
Versus, exactly what it is.
Right, versus believing that I can improve my intelligence, I can increase my competence, therefore I will increase my confidence, right? And so, but people will step back and just believe that they should be able to do everything right the first time they try. If
you can't already see the connections between developing a mindset like this and childhood, right? And how a child is raised, right? Where, if a child is raised in a place where, in an environment where it's not safe to make a mistake, right? Like there's severe consequences for any type of mistake that they might make, or anything that might be considered a failure has a severe consequence to it, then of course you're going to grow up to be an adult that avoids any type of semblance of failure, right? And so like if there's any chance that I can fail, I'm just not even going to try it. Let me go back over here into my comfort zone where I know that I won't fail, right? Where I know that my attempts have a higher probability of success. And like really, really inherent in the natural genius is a lack of resourcefulness and creativity.
And this one definitely, for me, speaks childhood, right? So parents, I'm going to speak to you for a second here, okay? If you constantly praise your child for every single thing they do right, and then make excuses that are external for everything they don't achieve, you're setting your child up to have this problem. Okay. So in other words, my son just finished trying out for baseball, and he's good, but he also hasn't been very diligent, right? He hasn't played in a couple of years. And so he worked really hard leading up to tryouts because he wants to be on the advanced team. Now, I still don't know, as the date of this recording, if he made the advanced team or not. This was just a few days ago. But afterwards, he was down on himself. He didn't feel like he performed his best. So I have two choices here. Oh, baby, you did everything perfectly. You did everything masterfully. You're going to do great. You're going to do fine. And if you don't make it, it's probably just because the coaches didn't see all the potential in you that I see.
Right. It's their fault.
If you do this shit to your kids, you're setting them up for a long life of letdowns. Okay? Instead, what I told him was, look, bud, you worked really hard to get to where you are. I understand that you're disappointed. You don't feel like you performed your best. And if you don't make the team, that's okay. Just know that your preparation got you to this point. And if you really want to make the team, you're going to have to work harder. It's been 2 years since you've played, and some of these kids have been playing in those 2 years. I know you love the game, but you took some time off. Some of it was COVID. Some of it was because we had to move and some other external circumstances. So, if you really want to get to that level, it takes work. Right? So I understand your frustration. You worked really hard to get to where you are. And if you want that next level, it's going to take more work. So he gets a little bit of encouragement, but he also gets a little bit like, if you want this, you got to work for it.
Yeah.
Right? Never be satiated. If you want it, go work. Right? Stop, playing on your phone or watching YouTube videos, and instead go outside and hit some balls off a tee. Right? Do some things that can further your abilities so that you can then make the team.
Kids need to be able to make the connection between their effort and their outcomes.
Right? Not your praise.
If you didn't like the outcomes, make a greater effort. Improve your performance, right? Who is responsible for that, right? You going outside and hitting tees isn't going to do anything for his performance. Mom, dad can't do it.
Right.
Right? They need to be the ones to take personal responsibility over their effort if they want a different outcome. The level of the outcome you got today is a result of the effort that you've put into it so far.
This extends into like your teachers, right? They'll be blaming the teachers for your kids' bad grades. You can't do that. You can't teach people to go through life praising them for all the things that are low level and high level. Mm-hmm. Right? They have to be taught how to, like you said, create their own existence. Right? So take the fourth one for us, Coach. I know this is one you mentioned that you struggle with sometimes.
Fourth one is the soloist. And so this is a type of imposter syndrome where you feel like if you had to ask for help to get to the outcome, then it wasn't good enough. You didn't really reach it on your own. And so therefore, it's just okay. You start to question your competence. I couldn't have done it without these other people. Darn.
Must mean I'm not good enough.
Right. Must mean I'm not good enough to do this, And so a lot of people are here because you are afraid to ask for help. And so you're in this place where you're like, man, I really could use help with this. But because you have a story associated with asking for help, and maybe you're even equating that with meaning that you're not intelligent enough or that you are weak, right? Some form, it's like it's a sign of weakness if I ask for help or something like that. Then you are really handicapping yourself in an incredible way, whereas another person might think like, oh, let me put together an incredible team to get this project done and, give them the credit when it's done, right? Like how beautiful it is to be a part of a team and to experience that dynamic and that synergy and go like, I could not have done it without my team. That's incredible. Or my teammate, if it's one person. But this idea that if you had to ask for help, it's just not good enough.
And I hate to tell this to you, and if you are a high-achieving entrepreneur or an executive, you know this, right? But if you're just starting off in this world, you might not. No one can do it by themselves. No one. You cannot. Okay? You hear all these, I'm a self-made person, bullshit. No, you're not. Okay? You may have put in long hours and work and done a lot of the initial legwork on your own, the actual action taking. But I guarantee you there was books that were read that helped you. There was people that you spoke to, courses that you took, right, that help you curb the amount of time, right? If you think you can do this all by yourself, could you? Probably, but it's going to take you 2-3 times as longer, right? Everyone needs the assistance of somebody who has been where they want to go.
Being or becoming self-made doesn't mean you did it alone. Because self-made is an experience in addition to a mindset that, you need to have that mindset first to even understand that you can't do it alone and to get resourceful and creative and find the right people and resources to support you to get the outcomes you want, right? So obviously that doesn't there's no room for imposter syndrome in that mindset, you know? And the other thing is, if you're at a place where you're thinking, I have to do it alone, really start to think about why. Why do you think that? Is it that you don't trust other people to be able to support you well? Is it that you haven't really exposed yourself to people of the caliber that you would want to be around? And so you think like, oh, better off alone, because the kinds of people I would want to spend time with, like, I can't find them, or they don't exist. They're not out there, right? This happens a lot in relationships, you know? If that's the story in your mind, you're not trying hard enough to find people that could support you and that you could relate to.
For those of you who are the soloist and you've adopted this mindset and you're hearing this and you're thinking to yourself, well, screw these two. I did it on my own. I was here by myself. And I made it happen. If you're thinking that to yourself, I would challenge you to go back and think about how much time you might have lost. How many relationships did you forego?
How much further you might be if you had asked for help, and how much more fun you might have had if you had allowed other people into the mix.
All right, last type, number 5 here. This is the super person.
Yep.
Okay. You actually believe you have to be the hardest working person. You've got to get up before everybody else does, and you got to stay late. And because if you don't, and the success comes from some external circumstance other than your own hard work, you're a fraud.
You got to be the hardest worker, yes, but you also have to reach the highest level of achievement, right? So unless I am an elite athlete, I'm not going to play a sport at all, right? Unless I can be, like at the highest level of performance of anything that I'm doing, I'm just not going to even bother, right? And so you see how it's just such a huge excuse that people are using to stay, to play small, right? And to not have to go all in. Like, I could crush that if I wanted to. I'm just not going to, because, right? Like, there's too many people already in it. Okay. Yeah. Meanwhile, criticizing all the people that are in it.
Right.
Right. Like, you know who you are, because you've got your red cape on if this is you. Right. And you've got to be the best and the highest achieving in anything in order to feel like it was worthwhile.
These are also the people that anytime you take time off, right, you can't help but I just heard a chuckle over there from it's from Vic, our lovely podcast producer here from Brand Crumbs, who chuckled when I said that, because you have a hard time taking a break. You have a hard time going on vacation, shutting down, because you believe that you have to be constantly doing something in order to be successful, right? Did I get you there? So, and it's simply not true. Vacation is not a reward for success. All right. This shit comes from childhood again. Get good grades. Let me buy you an Apple Watch. Are you kidding me? Why are we celebrating that?
It's also from growing up in the mindset that you have to perform first and then you can get a reward, right? Do your homework, then you can go outside. Right? Eat your dinner, then you can have the snack that you want, right? So everything is like foregoing in this sense of like self-sacrifice, and then I can receive something. Right? And so what the high achiever will do is, learn this pattern and cycle of self-sacrifice before I can have. Why? Because I have to earn that thing.
Yep.
Right? I have to earn rest rather than giving yourself rest as part of meeting your own needs, right? Because, and also understanding that rest will actually help you improve your performance.
Exactly. So what we're saying, just to be 100% clear here, is that rest, vacation, and downtime is not a reward for your success. What we're saying is it's a requirement for your success. It is a requirement. Okay. So what's the point in working your ass into the ground to eventually be able to take a vacation when you can take that rest, you can take that downtime, and also be able to find some clarity there, be able to find a moment to say, you know what, this is why I'm doing this, right? So I recently was able to do this and combine it into work, right? I went to, and I'm one that feels guilty. Like I feel like, man, I should be doing something right now, right? I shouldn't be out here going for a walk in the morning. I should be pounding out emails and doing all these things. But the thing is I took 4 weeks to go travel. I worked while I traveled, and people are like, oh, who takes a month vacation? I'm like, I didn't take a month vacation. I traveled and worked because I'm fortunate enough to not have to be confined to a brick and mortar business. So it took a couple weeks, went to Mexico. Then I took a couple weeks, went to Puerto Rico, took my son with me, treated him, took my mom with me, treated them, right? This is a benefit, right? This is not because I got to a certain point in my life and I can now go enjoy myself, right? I was able to work. I was able to get clarity. I was able to work out on a rooftop in my little, place that I stayed in Puerto Rico. And I was able to write some really good stuff. I was able to come up with some great content and some great ideas and things that really give me clarity on where I want to go and why I want to go there. Okay. Along with taking my calls, working with my clients, showing up for my business, right? So again, rest time and vacation and downtime is not a reward. It's a requirement for success.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody that could benefit from hearing this message. Someone that you might have might be struggling with imposter syndrome, might actually be able to have a huge personal breakthrough from being able to understand a little bit more about that particular experience of imposter syndrome and really hearing about it discussed openly and honestly in this way. So please share this episode, rate and review it. We would love to be able to have you join our community as well. If you text the word EDGY, EDGY, to 33777, you'll receive a link to join our community on Facebook, where we go live every other week, and you'll get first and exclusive access to our blog posts and our podcasts. So go ahead and text EDGY to 33777.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you all have a great rest of the day. Take care. Talk to you soon.